Hi everyone. I'm going to be talking to you about preparing funding proposals. So that could either be for fiction or non-fiction, for short, mid-length or feature-length projects. All the same rules pretty much apply. So when you are ready to start applying to funds with your project, the first step is obviously to do research on what funds are out there. There are a lot of resources online about different funds all around the world and on the continent. So you can do that research. I would visit all the websites of the funds. I would make notes of any deadlines that are coming up. I'd put them in a calendar. I would follow them on social media. I would sign up for their newsletters. Any way that just makes sure that you will always be notified if there are deadlines coming up, if they've got news, if they're offering new resources or training. My first step is always to make sure I'm following them and that I'm just fully engaged with that particular fund so that I don't miss anything. The next step is I would read all of the guidelines and all of the frequently asked questions on their website. I want to make sure that I'm eligible for the fund, that my project fits with the fund, that if they really want projects that are with a social justice focus, for example, and my project really is not that, I don't want to spend days preparing materials for a fund that really doesn't fit my project. The next thing I would do is I would download the application form, or if it's an online application, I would log in to their portal. I would read the entire application all the way to the end, because there is nothing worse than getting to the very end of an application and being ready to submit, only to find that there is a whole list of materials that I still need to prepare and send to them. So really make sure that you have fully interrogated that fund, their application form, their guidelines, their frequently asked questions. Really make sure you're very familiar with what the fund is looking for and what kinds of projects they support. That's a really useful way to get a sense of what they're interested in. You could go and see the list of films that they have supported. If you can find those films, if they're finished and they're out there and you can watch them, even better. Sometimes they also announce how much money they've given to those films. So I think just generally getting a sense of what that fund is after and who they're supporting is such a useful tool to know whether your film could fit with them. I think the next step before preparing your materials is to really stop and ask yourself if this is the right time to submit. Sometimes funds have more than one deadline. For example, the National Film and Video Foundation has 3 or 4 a year. Sometimes you only get one shot at applying to a fund. So it's really important to make sure that your project is at the right stage and be really honest with yourselves. If you think, actually we could do with spending some more time on the script and maybe we submit our next draft, or I don't think our rough cut is ready, there's still quite a lot of work I want to do, really sit with your team, discuss it, make sure that you're all really comfortable before you make a submission. Once you've decided that you want to apply, there's a whole lot of materials that you'll have to prepare that are both creative and sort of financial. So if you're the producer, make sure you're working with your director. If you're the director, make sure you're working with your producer or your team on preparing those materials. It's a very collaborative process and you want to make sure that everybody is on the same page about what you're putting forward, about how you're presenting your project to the world and to that fund. So in summary, here's a little quick overview. Number 1, do your research on the fund. Number 2, make a checklist of all the documents and materials that you're going to need to supply. Number 3, adapt your materials to suit the fund. So if, for example, it's a documentary film and you're going to be submitting it to a social justice documentary fund, make sure you really highlight the social justice elements of your film. Make sure all your documents align. So if you've made changes to your script, make sure that's reflected in your treatment or in your synopsis. Make sure your budget and your finance plan match. Just take a little bit of extra time to do a thorough check of all your materials before you submit. Anticipate any weaknesses in your application or in your project. So, for example, if you're perhaps all first-time filmmakers and you're a little bit worried about it, address it in your application. Perhaps it's a real asset to your project, and perhaps you have really exclusive access to your character, or you have lived the experience that's in your script. Really take the opportunity to answer any questions that the jury assessing your project might have. Answer the questions before they are asked. Next, pretty obvious one, make sure you get your application in on time. And lastly, use the time after you've submitted to look for other means of funding or other means of support. Obviously, make other applications, but really take time to connect with other people in the industry. They may have resources or information that you're not aware of, or they could offer support in kind. Maybe somebody has a camera that they don't use on the weekends. If there are film screenings happening at a local independent cinema, at a cultural institute, go to it, meet people, talk about your project, and just connect with people, and you never know what can happen from those interactions. So I hope this was useful, and good luck.